Hello, and welcome to ProjectWise Field Data Management demo and training of Web-based Forms Designer. In this demo, I'd like to show you a couple best practices on how to use the Web-based Forms Designer and to make your life easier when you start working with that. So the first thing what we're gonna do, we're gonna enter Field Data Management Service from our project. Here I have selected my learning project, and I'm gonna go into Field Data Management Service. And here we have our Forms Manager opened. So in this project, I already have couple categories and couple forms in each of the category created already. So what we want to do right now is to start creating a brand new form from scratch. So I'm gonna create a new form under daily category. So I'm gonna select that category and say create form. So I have my category selected here. Although if I want to create a new category or change it to different category, I can do it right from here. But here I'm going to create a category that's going to be demo. Sorry, I have category selected and I'm gonna create a demo form. So I add the name of a form and say create. And what's happening right now is that the form is being created and I have the forms designer opening already. And here it's opened and we need to start working right in this environment. So there are a couple things what we need to do to start working with the form. The first thing is to set our canvas size. Typically, if we are targeting the form to be on the iPad, which would normally be like 10 inches iPad, for instance, so I may want to adjust my canvas to the size of a um, of this size tablet. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go into form settings, I go into style, and here for the width of the canvas, I'm gonna say 700 pixels. So this canvas size now corresponds approximately to the 10 inches iPad portrait style. So I can now have the orientation and it helps me to start creating the objects in the form and understand how that's gonna look like. All right, so this is about how we set the canvas size. The next thing is to decide how we want to create a form. So I'm talking about the style, and we have two selections. It's the flow mode, the one that we default to, or the absolute. So the difference about these two styles are that if I choose the absolute style and I can put the object, for instance, this text box here, and I can move and place this text box wherever I want it. However, later on, and just for instance, I can now say that it has label. So that has label, and let's put something on the label, say location. All right, so I can make it a little bit wider. So I have this control right here, and a really nice feature about this Forms Designer is the preview function. So I can switch to preview and it gives me the approximate look on the device. So it really helps you to design your forms quicker rather than every time to approve the form and see how it looks like on the actual um, device. So, so the difference between these absolute and flow modes are now in the absolute mode, I just put the control here and I set the specific width of that. So if I change the portrait, my object is not responsive to the orientation. It's not stretching to the width of a device, and it's not, and it does not. Um, it's actually just stays where I put. So, but it allows me to put the control wherever I want it. So now if I want to have the reactive controls to my orientation and to the size of a screen that I open the form on, I'm gonna change it to flow mode. So now if I change to the flow mode and if I add the same control and I say has label, I can put the same label text location. And now to be just a little bit smarter on the on the width of the control, I can select the control. I can go into style, and now I can say, right, I want to use not pixels but percents, and it means now that I'm using 20% width of the line where this control is put. So it's only 20%. So if I want to use like the whole line, I can put like that. I'm saying 100%, and now let's see what happens now when I'm gonna preview that. So I have my preview mode, and I have my object here that is using 100% of this line uh, on a screen. Now if I change the orientation, it stretches to reach the edge of just to reach the edge of the screen, and it's always gonna look like that. So you don't need to scroll the form left and right to see the objects. So this is the benefit of the flow mode. All right, so another thing what we may want to do is just to talk about a little bit about the controls. So now when I have the control, and I can do it all over again. So let's start designing the actual form. The first thing what I want to do is to create the label of the form. So I can put the label control, and I can say this is going to be my site diary form, site diary. All right. Okay, so I want that this line is taking 100%, so I cannot add any objects behind this control. So I'm gonna select this control, and I'm gonna go to styles. I'm gonna choose the percent and 100%. So site diary. All right. We're gonna later also play with the styles a little bit. All right. So now what I'm gonna do, I want to have two pick lists underneath this line, which is going to define the location and another um, another another object gonna define the weather conditions, for instance. So I'm gonna add the location. If I know the predefined location, I might use the pick list and define all those locations there. If I don't have defined location, I probably gonna use a text box just to have uh, completely uh, freedom to enter any location I wanted. But in this time, I'm gonna use drop-down control here. So I'm using drop-down control. I have has label. Just put that underneath that, and I'm gonna say the label text is location. All right. And I'm gonna select. So let's talk now about the selection. So when I added the control here, which is a drop-down list, and also said that it has label here. So now this object has multiple selections. So the first thing what I can select here is the control itself, and just always keep an eye on what you have selected before you do the changes. So it says selected control, and now I have the selected control select list 1, which is this actual drop down here, and I can change the width of that and etc. Now if I want to play a little bit with the label itself, so I'm making sure that I'm selecting the label 2. My label 1 is this guy, and my label 2 is this guy. So I have selected label 2. Now if I want to make this control to be 50% width of this line, I need to be careful what I'm selecting here, but if I select and make sure that I have label control, which means that this is a combination of the label and the actual control. So I have the label controlled selected, and I'm going now to style, and I'm gonna change to 50%, and now I have selected, and the the label and the control now both are taking 50% of the actual line. And what I can do else, I can now add another drop down here. I'm gonna say has label. All right. And I'm gonna say again, this label has weather. And I'm gonna select label controlled to, go to styles, select percent, and I'm gonna change it to 50. All right, cool. So this is now taking the 100, using 100% of my line, and these two objects always gonna be there. So let's see if I go to preview mode and I see this site diary and two fields with those pick lists. And if I change the orientation, it stretches out to use my 100% of my width of the screen width. All right, so that's just a tip. Always make sure what you have selected before you're doing the changes. So always remember that the label control is the combination of a label and the actual control. Okay, and now I can show you what's the difference with the labels and the selected controls. So I'm going to add the text box here, and I'm gonna say it has label. Just jumped out, so I'm adding it here. And this time I'm going to say it has label not on the top but on left. All right. Okay, and I'm gonna use, again, I'm selecting the control. I have label control 3 selected. I'm gonna choose style, and I'm gonna change percent and choose 100. All right. So what it did right now, as you can see, it actually stretched the label control to use 100% of a line. But what it did, it allocated 50% for the label and 50% for the actual control. This is not what I want to have. I want to have much smaller space allocated for the label and a wider space allocated to the um, for the actual control. So what we can do here, we can firstly put the uh, the label for the control here. So I'm selecting label, and we just put the name for the label, and we're gonna say weather weather description. All right, and what I see here that it's really taking like only 25% of the line, and I'm gonna choose that change that back to the 100%, and I'm gonna allocate for the label, I'm gonna only allocate like 25%, which is right about the width of the actual label. So I have allocated 25% for the label of this label control, and now I'm gonna select the text box. Right, and I'm gonna go to style, and I'm gonna choose that for 75%. So it really uh, aligns nicely with the actual label. So that's uh, how you need to make sure what you select. But if you make sure what you select and uh, and do that accurately, you really have a lot of flexibility on how you want to change uh, and uh, and put your controls with the labels here. All right, so now you might have a question on what these red icons mean. This is probably the most important thing about the data that you're gonna enter through this form. So as we just creating a form layout and form definition, the very important thing is about where the data is going to be put when I enter data through my mobile device, for instance. So the data is going to be placed in the cloud in our Azure storages. But in order to do that, we need to know the endpoints for the data to settle down. So for instance, for the location attribute here, we need to dedicate a special location there. And that's what we're gonna do here. We're gonna click on this on this icon, and we're gonna create a binding. So I'm selecting that, or another way is just to select this label control, and here under properties we see the binding. And if we click on the binding icon, we get the same dialog here. So one thing to note is that we just added this location here. So for the location attribute, we already predefine what type of the data could be here. So if I click again on the binding, it can be a string property. So what can I have here is I also see on the list the controls from the other forms that I have created for the same category, and I can reuse it if I want it. But I'm gonna create a new string property here and say site location. So for those administrative users, just imagine like you are creating like a table and you just put a column for a table where you define a data type. So this is exactly what we're doing right here. So I'm just created a property here for this for the location. Also going to create a binding for the weather. I'm adding site weather. So once again, if you don't have a binding set for the attribute, your data won't be saved. So just always make sure you don't have any red icons on your form controls. Always create the bindings and your data will be stored. And this is the weather description. Weather description. So once you just create a binding, it's done. You can move on with the form and it's gonna be there. Um, One other thing what we can do is to define the pick list values for that. So the location. If I know that my construction site and it has some locations in the construction site, I can go and create the uh, uh, I can go and create the l- list of values there. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna add item zone A, zone B, and say zone C. All right. And if I go to preview, I have all those zones here. I can even play with those zones here. Now I can also define my weather conditions, so for the user it would be easier to select. And we're gonna say it's sunny, rainy, or we can see a fog. And also if I do preview, I can play with that and see how that looks like. So weather description, we can leave it for users just to describe freely, so they can put some text here. All right. One other thing what I just forgot is maybe to put my company logo on top of a form. I can use this image control and I can make it a little bit wider. And I'm gonna select the image from my image library. I have few images already controlled. I'm gonna use Bentley logo here. I'm gonna save it and it looks good. If I preview it, that's how it looks like. Very cool. All right, I'm gonna save my form. My form is saved, and I could probably go and check my form how it looks like on the app. But before I do that, I'd like to quickly describe what other objects can do. So we already learned about the label text box. The number box is just to enter the numbers. So if I add a number box and if I try to create a binding, you will see that we only allow you to add either integer or decimal values, so you won't be able to put the string here. So only number can be added into the number box. So you can have that control added for those fields where you only expect a number to be added and you want to avoid users putting like text in there. So later on, these number boxes can also uh, do some math actions, which you won't be able to do with the text boxes. If you want to do a specific math that we'll do very quickly here. So the date picker is quite obvious. We add a date picker. It allows you to choose the date, and you can reuse that date picker as many times as you want it. Image control is to put the image typically for the company logos or any other image that you want to have it here. Text area control is for those reasons when you want your users to have a little bit richer text be added in a control. So for instance, this text box here is expected only one line for users to be added here. So if you want to have a control that allows you to put more text in it, you would add text area. So I just added this control here, and I'm gonna say has label, and I'm gonna choose that percent and 100% of the width. I'm gonna change the label text to say site description. I have created a binding for that site description. And what now we can do here is to put that control text area a little bit wider so we can allow users to put more text here. So instead of 30 pixels of the control width, we can add, say, 200 pixels, and we have a much wider space for users to add text here. So that's what this control is designed for. All right. The checkbox is quite obvious what it does. The drop down we used already. The user list is something I'd like to quickly uh, talk about. So the user list, if I add a user list and say has label. So for instance, I'm filing the site diary and I want to define who is actually performing the site diary. So I'm gonna say has label and I'm gonna say the performed by, and I'm gonna use 50% of the width. All right. I'm gonna say performed by, and this user list is going to look for the project participants only. So those users that you defined for your project only be available to select in this pick list. So just you need to keep in mind that you won't be able to select any other user that is outside your project. So always keep in mind that. And we can also put the file upload, and the file upload control will allow you to add um, to attach the file either image file or the video file. So for those users that are using that form on a mobile device, it will also allow you to open the camera controller. And for those users that are Using Edge for Windows, it will just simply allow you to attach the file from your computer. So, okay, so the next and the last control is the grid control. It allows me to create the grid, a table that I can define the values for the columns, and it will grow as I'm filling the data in. So, for instance, I added a grid control here. I can say I want to use it again to use the full width of the line, and I can put the file control underneath it, and I can now go and define my grid settings. If I go to grid settings here, I have my property array, which I need to define the whole grid, how it's going to be named. So I'm going to name work performed. So when I have my name for the array, I can now add the controls for the labels. All right. So I'm going to choose the text box for the first one, and I can say the column label, and it's going to be job done, or we can say work done, and we can create a binding for that, and it's going to be work done. And the second value is going to be description. So we're now just creating bindings for that grid control, and we're gonna say work description. All right, and now what it allows me to do is just to define the percent of the column width. So for the work performed, I'm gonna use like 35%, and for the description, I'm gonna use 65% of that. And I can also have those controls like read-only or multi-line. So for both of them, I'm gonna use multi-line controls, and I'm gonna save it. And that's how that applied on a table. All right, so I have added this grid control, and the next thing what we can do here is just to play a little bit with the styles. So for instance, we want to make the form label to be a little bit um, more attracting, right? So what we can do here is to put maybe the text a little bit bigger, and also make it bold. We can also change the color if we want. So I just selected this label control, go to the style tab, and I'm gonna create a new style. So I'm gonna uh, I would click on this icon to create a new style, but if I have already styles created, next time I can only just select the control and just apply the uh, uh, already created style. So for instance, I can select this label, maybe there's nothing. So if I change the subheading style, you see it just made my text bold. So what I can do, I can go and create my new style, and I'm gonna create a new style which is going to be called demo style, and I can choose the font here. So for instance this, I can make my text a little bit bigger, or even bigger, 28, and I can make it just to play with text a little bit, and also center it. I can make font style red, and I can make the background color white, or black, just to play a little bit. All right, so that's my style, and that's how it looks like. It the font is a little bit bigger right now, so what I can do here, I can select the control, I can go to style, and I can change it from 30 pixels to 60 pixels. And that looks good. All right, so that's how, and even in the preview mode, it's changed to my styling. All right, and if I change the landscape, it changes nicely and it stretches out to the corners of my screen. And the last thing what I'd like to show you is the actions on the form. So I'll do some math actions. So I'm gonna add a couple number boxes here. I'm actually gonna do 3 number boxes, and I'm gonna create bindings for that. I'm gonna add decimal, and I'm gonna say number one, number two, number three. I can apply actions on the form when I open the form, or actually I can apply the script on the object. So this time my desired scenario is that I put a number in my first field, then I put another number in my second field, and I get sum on the third field. So my logic is that I want to put the actions on this object when I select it. So I select this third number box, and then go into actions, and I'm gonna add action, and I'm gonna create a uh, new script, which is going to be sum, and it's going to be applied when I uh, either on one of the conditions, on focus, on change, or lost focus. So I want uh, to have this action performed when I select this object. Now need to create some conditions. So the logic is very simple. So when I have my number one is not empty, I only allow to add numbers in this field, and it means that if it's not empty, it means that it is a number there. So when my number one is not empty, or my number two is not empty too, then I'm doing these actions. I'm selecting, I'm doing math, but also you can see I can format control, change a value, prompt user. I'm doing math here. And my target field is number box 3. I do sum of number box 1 and number box 2. And that's pretty much how my action gonna look like. All right, so this is my action created, and I can actually preview that feature in the preview mode. If I go in the preview mode, and I'm gonna say 23 plus 12, and if I change, it does the math. So it pretty much concludes the overview about the Forms Designer. It's really impossible to overview everything what you can do here. We provide a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom for you to create your own forms. So if you have any questions or if you have any challenges, please engage with us on our social media or B Communities forums. And we'll be happy to get back to you and advise you with the best practices and help you and support you. So thanks a lot for your attention, and we look forward to hear from you. Thanks a lot.